Hello and welcome back. Week 19 is the week of your fantasy trade deadlines. This is when it starts to ramp up a bit. Now we're in the part of the season where you can make those waiver ads count a little bit more and where I can help you week by week to get into the playoffs. Also a big trade on Friday night, O'Reilly and Achari to the Leafs. Of the two, I'm sneaky high on Noel Achari, but I'll address my thoughts on that in a separate video later on. And for now, let's jump right into the Week 19 schedule. 52 games this week, 12 teams play 4 times, 4 play twice. Wednesday is the light night. Everyone else, or every other night, is relatively balanced. And there is one other Wednesday night game that's not shown here, and that's Dallas at home versus Chicago, but Dallas only plays twice, and Chicago plays 3 times. Best schedules, Islanders and Jets, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. They play each other on Wednesday and Sunday, so this is where you're going to be able to mine some fantasy value. And then we also have Calgary with a 4-game week and 2 light nights on Monday and Wednesday. I was trying to highlight the teams that did play on this Wednesday because that is the lightest night of the bunch. Also, we have the QR code down here. You can scan that and just go straight to the Data Draft page on Instagram for some shorter form content and some quick updates week by week. I'm trying to update every day a fantasy file of somebody notable, so you can access a couple more waiver ads by following me on Instagram at data_draft. But let's start with the Isles waiver ads. Now, the trade deadlines for most leagues are February 22nd, Wednesday. And the Isles have the fewest games in March and into the playoffs. So this may be the last chance to trade your Islanders and maybe the last time to stream Islanders. But nonetheless, we'll start with Anders Lee. Last 3 games, 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists, a power play point, 13 shots, 4.3 shots per game is excellent. He's the most complete player that we're going to talk about today in the entire video, I believe. 76 overall. You're getting some goals, you're getting some shots, you're also getting about a hit and a half per game, some power play production, although that is relatively low for Anders Lee, but he does block some shots, get some hits, and covers a little bit of everything. So he is still a really good streaming option if he's available. He's 55% owned, so he might not be. The next guy that we're talking about is Kyle Palmieri. I mentioned him a week or 2 ago as he was climbing up the rankings in the Data Draft Player Hub. He's kind of fallen a little bit, but nonetheless, 9 points in his last 11 games, 3 goals, 6 assists, a power play point. He's been getting pretty decent goal volume, shots as well, 2 shots per game, getting 1.6 hits per game as well. So bangers leagues, that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. And again, he's a 65, so he's relatively complete, just doesn't block a lot of shots. And he's typically a goal-scoring winger. He's a single-position right winger. He does get a little bit of PP2 time, but nonetheless, he's one of the few guys in the top 6 that you're going to potentially want to access that you can access. If Brock Nelson is there, pick him up. If Barzal's there, he's probably not. But yeah, obviously Barzal, Horvat, you're going to want access to for this week. If you have those guys and you're thinking long-term, you might want to get out from under them as they only play 12 times from March onwards. So that is something to keep in mind. And a reminder, you can access the player and goalie hubs that I'm using in this video in the Patreon link in the description below. And that will definitely come in handy leading into your trade deadline and into the playoffs. You can use the comparison tool to propose some trades to some guys in your league to get out from under some of these Islanders or do whatever you need to do. You can access that in the Patreon link in the description below. Now, as we move to Winnipeg, the waiver ads is a little bit shaky because the Jets have been 5-5 in their last 10 games, averaging 2.5 goals for and 2.5 goals against in that span. And that means nobody's really going in fantasy outside of the big dogs, and maybe one other player that you could potentially access, and that is Blake Wheeler. 54% owned, right winger, single position, 4-game point streak, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points, 2 power play points in that span. And again, he's one of the few guys that you can access, and he's relatively complete in terms of what he covers. If you don't have hits and blocks, he becomes even more valuable. He's a 70 on the Data Draft Player Hub with hits and blocks, so take those out and he becomes much more valuable. He's almost a point per game. 89th percentile in goals, 93rd in assists, and 86th percentile in power play points per game. So he's one of those offensive options. If he's available in your 10-team, 12-team league, I would definitely go out and pick him up in a week like this where he plays all those off nights, especially the Wednesday night game here against the Islanders. That's going to be a favorable matchup for Blake Wheeler. Now, there's really nothing else that I can talk about offensively. Cole Perfetti's been ice cold. You could go to Adam Lowry. They've moved Ehlers down to that line with Lowry, so you could potentially try to gain access to Ehlers' production through Lowry, but he's not necessarily producing right now. So the only other guy that I wanted to talk about is David Rittich. 6% owned, last 4 games, 2 wins, 2.14 goals against, and a .919 save percentage. And this was updated on the 11th, so this might not have 1 or 2 of these games in there, but the save percentage is relatively good, .909. That's above league average. 2.6 goals against is really decent as well, 81st percentile in that. And you're getting the team exposure, 55th percentile in team defense. Usually they make Hellebuck bail them out, so it is a little bit shaky, but nonetheless, Rittich has also been playing really well lately, and he would probably play one of these games despite there not being a back-to-back. So I would try to target him if you see him starting one of these games and you want that 1-game stream. I would definitely look at David Rittich, 6% owned, so he's probably there for you in most leagues. As we move to Calgary, I mentioned Dylan Dubé in a fantasy file. I did a YouTube short. I did an Instagram reel on him about a week ago. And if you listen to that, he's been producing for you. Obviously, you can see the stats on the screen here. 7 points in his last 4 games, 4 goals, 3 assists, 2 power play points, and 12 shots in that span. And on top of that, he's got 11 points in his last 10 games. So it's not just the past week. He's been going for a little while now. So if Dubé's there, he's definitely the ad. But you also have Michael Backlund. Teams are now trying to spread out their offense across 3 lines, as I just mentioned, with Ehlers going down to the 3rd line with Lowry. The same thing is going on in Calgary. They have Mangiapane with Backlund and Coleman. And that's a pretty decent line. Mangiapane scored last night, and then Backlund ended up with the game winner in overtime. So these are potential things to keep an eye on. And Backlund's file, you're getting elite level shot volume. So 3 shots per game out of Backlund. He's covering a little bit of everything here, about a hit per game. The power play production isn't really there, but he does have a power play point in the last week or 2. So he's starting to heat up, and he's typically one of those streaming options that I will go to out of Calgary. He's relatively consistent, and if you're getting that shot volume, that's usually something that helps you out in both category leagues and points leagues. So something definitely to keep an eye on. If you need a center, that's the only thing holding him back, is he's just a single position center. So there might be some better center options on your waiver wire depending on your league format. 21% owned, 22% owned for Dubé. Both of these guys should be there in most 12-team leagues, 10-team leagues, and so on. Probably not in 14 and 16-team leagues, but nonetheless, these are the 2 guys that are on fire for Calgary, and these are who I would be looking at to pick up in a 4-game week this week. Now, for the best of the rest, the defense options, Keandre Miller, 59%. He might not be there for you, but obviously you're going to want to access the Rangers. They've been averaging 4.5 goals for per game in the last 10, so anybody on the Rangers is a good ad, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. 5 points in his last 7, 19 hits, and 11 blocks in that span as well. In terms of the Islanders, Adam Pelech is not an offensive option, but he does have 2 assists in the last 7 games. But you're mainly adding him for the shots, hits, and blocks, which he does cover pretty well. So he's typically a hits and blocks option, and he's been shooting the puck a little bit more now. So that does add a little bit of a floor to his file, especially a deeper league option, 3% owned. He's probably there for you in 14 and 16-team leagues. Now, Eric Gustafsson, I mentioned him a while ago because he was on fire. Then he kind of cooled off a little bit. Now he's somewhat back. So 4 assists in his last 5 games, 2 on the power play, 10 shots, 7 hits, and 6 blocks. So covering a little bit of everything. His ownership has dropped down a little bit, now down to 41%. He was in the 70s when he was on fire. So this is definitely a file you're going to want to access in a 4-game week. 66 on the player hub. So he's relatively complete, as you can see, with the shots, hits, and blocks, as well as the offensive production and the power play exposure. So he's definitely an option that you could look to now that he's starting to ramp it up a little bit. I believe he had a 3-assist game in this stretch as well. So he can do it in bunches when they have a good matchup. Now, as we turn to Cam Fowler, Fowler and Shattenkirk both have similar stats. I chose to go with Fowler because, to me, he's the more reliable option. 13% owned, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in his last 2 games. A power play point in there and 5 shots. He's a 62 on the hub, meaning he's a little bit more complete than a guy like Shattenkirk. Shattenkirk is 3% owned. So if you can't access Fowler, you could access Shattenkirk, but Shattenkirk's stats all came in 1 game. So that's another reason why I mentioned Fowler here instead of Shattenkirk, but both of them have a 4-game week and are starting to get some more power play looks and some offensive exposure as well. But the number one guy that I would look at out of all of this bunch is Jeff Petrie, 52% owned, 2 assists in his last 6 games, but 16 shots and 12 hits. And you look at his hub over here, you're getting elite level hits and blocks, 97th percentile hits, 94th percentile in blocks, 3.14 hits per game, and almost 2 blocks per game. And then on top of that, you're getting power play exposure and 79th percentile in assists. So this is one of those hits and blocks guys that gets some power play time when Letang is out specifically. But, you know, Letang's been in and out of the lineup. You never know if he's healthy or not. So Petrie at a 75 on the Data Draft Player Hub is somebody that I would typically look to stream out of this bunch. But if you just need a hits and blocks guy, and he's not available because Petrie is 52% owned, Rasmus Ristolainen in a 4-game week is another really good option. 3 assists, 2 power play points, 19 hits in his last 6 games. The offensive production is a little bit surprising because he's not known for that. He's known for his hits and blocks, but for him to add 3 assists and 2 of those on the power play is encouraging if you're looking to pick him up for this upcoming week. But that's going to do it for the D. Let's turn to the forward ads. Now, in terms of forward streamers, Frankie Vetrano, 11% owned. I've been mentioning him a little bit now the last couple weeks because of his shot volume. 3 shots per game is what he averages. In the last 8 games, 6 goals, 2 assists, 8 points, 28 shots. So you're getting that shot volume. You're getting some goals. That's typically what he's known for. He is playing third line right now, but he's also on PP2. So the power play time might start to come if they can continue to, you know, look at him as potential goal scoring option. He wasn't scoring goals earlier in the season. Now he is, so maybe he'll get a little bit more opportunity. And he is a 70 on the Data Draft Player Hub because he also throws a couple hits in there as well. But the shot volume is the main reason that you would own him. Now, Casey Middlestat, 3% owned. He's not somebody that I would normally recommend. Right now, he's third line with Peyton Krebs and Jack Quinn. And I do like those 2 players, so that is a decent line assignment despite the fact that he is third line. But if you look at his last 3 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, and a power play point, that is something to take notice of, especially if you're in a deeper league. 3% owned, he's probably going to be there for you in almost every league. I wouldn't look at him in a 12-team league, but if you're in a 14, 16-team league or above, he's definitely producing now, and he's a younger player, so these younger players are streaky, and right now he seems to be hot. Now, one of the more reliable streaming options all season has been Victor Arvidsson, 24% owned, dual eligible. This is all 1 game. So 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, 2 power play points in his last game, and then 3 shots on top of that. This line might be reunited together now that Trevor Moore is back. That Moore, Danault, Arvidsson line, I've been mentioning them all season, since the preseason basically. They're all excellent streaming options. Moore is 10% owned, Danault is 30% owned, and Arvidsson 24% owned. Any of them are really reliable streaming options in a 12-team league. And then Arvidsson is a 69 on the Player Hub as well, so he's relatively complete. But the best files that you're going to find this week are likely Rangers because they've been scoring a ton, as I just mentioned. They're 4.5 goals for per game in their last 10. This kid line, when together, are dynamic, and you could see it here. Alexis Lafreniere was in the doghouse for a while, and since then, everybody was talking about, oh, he got scratched, what happened? And since then, 9 points in his last 10 games, a power play goal, a game winner in the shootout. So he's been getting it done. 5 goals, 4 assists in that span. He's 29% owned, dual eligible. Of these guys, of the entire kid line, I would prefer to have Philip Hedl, 38% owned, center, right wing, 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points in his last 10 games, and almost 3 shots per game in his shot volume. He's still getting the chances. They just haven't been going in like they were last week, but nonetheless, he's still an excellent option. And if you can't get those 2 players, Capo Caco, only 7% owned, 2 goals, 7 assists, 9 points in his last 10 games. So that entire line is close to, if not over, a point per game. And that's definitely something to take notice of, especially since most of them, if not some of them, are going to be available in most league formats. Now, in terms of Minnesota and Philadelphia, they're both struggling offensively. None of them showed up here. Minnesota is averaging 1.7 goals per game in their last 10, so there's nobody going in Minnesota. They're not giving any run support to their goaltending either. Flyers, not much better, 2.2 goals for per game in their last 10. So again, a lot of those streaming guys like Frost, Owen Tippett, some of those guys have fallen off. Konechny hit the wire in one of my leagues. I put a claim on him and did not get him. So there's not a lot going on in Philly, so we'll move right down to Tampa and go with Anthony Cirelli. 16% owned, center left wing, 6 points in his last 7 games, 19 shots, and he's typically relied on late in games. They trust him. Obviously, he's a very defensively responsible center, but the offense has been coming in the last 7 with 6 points and a power play point in that span. And then last but not least, TJ Oshie. Finally, I wanted to talk about him for a couple weeks now, and the production is slowly starting to come. A goal, 2 assists, a power play point, 12 shots, and 6 hits in the last 5 games. So the main reason you would own him, the 2.16 hits per game combined with the 2.29 shots per game and the 0.29 goals per game. So shots, goals, and hits are his main features, but he does get power play time. He's typically in that bumper spot when everybody's healthy. Obviously, Ovechkin is dealing with a family matter, so he's not there, but Oshie has been picking it up lately at only 22% owned, dual eligible center right wing. I would definitely look to TJ Oshie, especially in a 4-game week like this. Week 19 goalie streamers. There's a couple of interesting files here. I already mentioned Riddick in the Jets segment, so we'll move it to Jonas Korpisalo. He's got a 3-game week, and they're all backloaded, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, so you could stream someone for the front half or 1 start and then pick him up for the second half. And in his last 3 games, 2 wins, 1.67 goals against, 954 save percentage. So really good numbers. He's taken the net from Merzlikins, and he's now the guy in Columbus. They don't have great defensive exposure in terms of what you're going to get in terms of assisting Korpisalo to help him get wins for you, but he is playing really well nonetheless. So he's definitely one of those guys. If you're in need of a starter or more starts this week, I would look to Korpisalo. If you need 1 start, I would look at Antti Raanta, 41% owned. He'll get you 1 quality start either Friday against Ottawa or Saturday against Anaheim. Both of those are winnable games for Carolina, and he will have to start one of those unless they call up Kochetkov for some reason. But Antti Raanta is typically a really good streaming option when he's in net. Then you have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, 6K as some are calling him. I didn't get that memo, so I've been wondering who the hell that was. But nonetheless, in his last 6 games, 3 wins, 347 goals against, 899 save percentage is not great, but it is the best of the 3 Buffalo goaltenders. So he will likely get 2 or 3 games. They do have difficult opponents this week. Comrie is 4% owned. He's 2-0 in his last 2, so maybe he'll get one of these games. Anderson is 11% owned, but UPL, as I just mentioned, has the best numbers out of all of them. So let's hope that Buffalo can chip away at some of these games and get back into the playoff picture. And if they do that, I would venture a guess that UPL, or 6K, as some are calling him, would be in net for those wins. Now, for Calgary, Darth Vladar, I'm not even going to mention his first name because this is so much cooler. 5 games, 3 wins, 299 goals against, 875 save percentage. Again, not great, but better than Markstrom. Markstrom is an 864. So Vladar will start either Wednesday at Arizona or Thursday at Vegas at the very least. He might get 2 starts, but at the very least, he's going to get one of those starts. If it's against Arizona, that would definitely be a nice streaming option for that Wednesday, which is very light. And last but not least, Halak has quietly been outplaying Shesterkin. If you look at the numbers down here, Shesterkin with an 896 over the last month, Halak with a 921, and he kept the Rangers in that game and basically got him a point last night. So definitely been picking it up, and he's only 8% owned. So if you've owned him for this entire month, you've been getting 40% of the Rangers starts, and then you're also getting basically Shesterkin level production out of Jaro Halak, and he will have to start one of the back-to-back games, Saturday at Washington or Sunday home against LA. So he'll get 1 start at a very minimum, could see 2 starts in a 4-game week, but nonetheless, at least 1 start out of him could be really interesting to mine some fantasy value out of. And then I didn't have room for it, but Brian Elliott will also start one of the back-to-back games for Tampa Bay in either Detroit Saturday or Pittsburgh Sunday. And in his last game, he had a 26 save shutout against Arizona. So definitely something to keep an eye on for Brian Elliott. He's typically a streaming option that you can go to. Last thing that we're going to cover, fantasy performance. I am no longer undefeated in my face-off league. It was a nail biter. I didn't want to blow up my team to try to win and continue the streak, so I just kind of punted that one. But an impressive performance. I don't even remember who beat me, to be honest with you, but I believe it was the second place guy. But nonetheless, still in first place, still in first in my main league. The Data Draft League, things are starting to heat up here. I've been chipping away, coming back. I was undefeated for the first 4 or 5 weeks and then went on a terrible slide. Didn't have good goaltending. I have Sorokin, so he was horrendous for a while. But he started to pick it up a little bit. Hopefully I get Jari back, but nonetheless, I'm comfortably in 5th. I guess you could say comfortably because I'm probably going to win this week, and so are these two guys. So it's going to be coming down to the wire, but hopefully I will get into the playoffs in all 4 of the leagues. And right here, here's again the QR code for the Instagram. You can just scan that with your phone. I've been doing a lot of fantasy files, shorts, Instagram reels, trying to give you guys the best info heading into your trade deadlines, heading into your playoffs. If you were watching some of those, I mentioned Harvey Pinard when he was 2% owned. He's had a great week since then. I mentioned Dubé in that. I mentioned Matheson the other day. There's a lot of guys that are flying under the radar that you can get access to if you follow me on Instagram at @data_draft. You can just take a picture of this QR code and it'll pop up on your phone. But that's going to do it for this video. If you watched till the end, I want to thank you for doing so. Leave your comments down below. I'll try to get to as many of those as I can today. And as always, I will see you tomorrow for the top performers from last week.